What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the Home to Self podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hello. My name is Lilly, and I am really excited to be recording a dual podcast and YouTube video today. Really, my first one doing it intentionally like this. And I want this to feel like a sit down with your friend, a coffee chat with someone you love, and a chance for us to dive into a topic that I know for a fact impacts so many people and women specifically. I am a mindset coach. I do a lot of coaching for women, helping them to shed the layers that they have adopted as part of their persona from childhood to fit in into the world, right? To be loved and accepted and make an impact. Um, but in order to truly live an authentic life and to express ourselves and share our gifts with the world, it requires us to shed some of the layers that aren't coming from an authentic place, that are still coming from a place of lack, of fear, of scarcity, or some other feeling that sits underneath there, right? And it allows us to feel so much more free, so much more expressed, so much more authentic, so much more joyful, and really be able to walk through this life as who we came here to be and live a life that is truly aligned and meant for us. And one of the obstacles that gets in the way the most, like I said, especially for women, is this deeper struggle with perfectionism, right? And if you see me looking over here, it's because I've got my notes on my computer, still figuring out this technical stuff, but bear with me. So, like I said, perfectionism is a quality and an identity that so many women, especially, but men as well, have taken on. And for a long time, and I have as well, that's why I'm speaking on this, right? I'm not an expert, but I have learned a lot myself, and I want to share what I've learned because I think it can be really helpful to start to disassociate from that identity and start to reveal our truth and our authenticity underneath, because that is our magic. Your authenticity is your superpower, flaws and imperfections and all. Your authenticity, what is true to you, who you really are, is your magic. And yet we aren't brought up with that understanding or that perspective. We are more so modeled and taught that you should be someone you're not. You should be better than you are. You should be smarter. You should achieve more things. You should make more money. You should act a certain way in order to attract the partner you desire. Right? There's all these shoulds, there's all these expectations, and sometimes even self-created perspectives of how we should show up in the world in order to get our needs met and be happy, right? The reason we do so much of these things, like get the job and search for the partner and sometimes even do like plastic surgery and change our physique and work really hard at the gym, is because we are craving the feelings that we think are associated with that, right? And so feelings like being loved, belonging, having community, having really good friends, having people who just see you and understand you. And all of those are basic human needs. And so it makes sense why we would go to such far extents in order to achieve those feelings that we are desiring, that we are looking for. But there is a different way. There's a different way for us to feel those feelings without having to exhaust our way there, or abandon our truth on the way there, or overwork ourselves, or say yes when we really mean no, or work ourselves to the ground. There's so many ways that we can do this, right? And so much of my story, which I'm going to weave into this conversation to give you something to relate to and to be able to share with you my own experience, has been, using my physique and my physical health as a way to try and reach the feeling of being loved, of being worthy. And for a really long time, I had no idea that that's what I was subconsciously doing. But because I now really truly understand the subconscious mind and how these programs are formed at a young age that drive our behavior, I have since then recognized and revealed my own fears of not being enough, of not being loved, of not being accepted or worthy that were driving those perfectionist tendencies. And this is why I'm such a believer and such an advocate for doing the deep self work and the subconscious work to reveal these deeper programs and identities that were created from a young age that, again, we're not aware of until we start digging, is because so often when we do the self-help work and we do the inner work, we are looking really just at the behaviors or the actions or the results that we're getting in order to create change in our lives. And although that's part of the equation, that's part of the work, really that's the surface level. Underneath that, it's like we have to reverse engineer our way all the way to the root cause in order to really evoke change and create a lasting shift in your life. And if you look back from there, it's like the subconscious identity or belief that lives deep, deep, deep in your subconscious is the root of it, right? And that influences your feelings, your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions, and therefore your results. And so just looking at results doesn't get us as far as actually getting all the way down to the deep subconscious, either stories or identities is the two buckets that they fall under, right? And identity is what we're looking at today in terms of usually it's a negation of who you truly are, right? Who you truly are underneath all of the layers and the titles and what you've accomplished in your life and what you do and don't have and your personality traits. There's a soul, there's an essence that is untouchable, that is worthy exactly as you are just for being alive. And the example I like to give for that is imagine a newborn baby, just freshly born, freshly coming into this world. Every single person, every single adult that sees that newborn baby recognizes how much of a miracle it is, recognizes its inherent worth and value and essence of love just for being alive. There's nothing that baby has to do. There's nothing that baby has to say or accomplish or anything that anyone that baby has to be other than him or herself. And we all just recognize the beauty, the love, the miracle that that being is. And you still are that baby. You are that baby. I am that baby. We are all that baby. The only thing that's happened is that we have been conditioned both through what we've been modeled from caregivers and society and teachers and friends, and also what we have experienced, the hurtful experiences, especially in childhood and middle school and adolescence, that we then create meaning of we create meaning about that, of who we are and how we fit into the world. And it's those deeper stories and programs that then become these filters that cloud our perception of the truth, which is that remembrance that you are still that innocent, pure, loving being, that baby underneath all of the layers, right? And that is this work. And then we're going to get into the perfectionist piece in just a moment, but that is the basis of the inner work, right? Of coming back to who you really are. It's starting to dissolve layer by layer everything that you are not, everything that you learned you should be, everything that you adopted as a coping mechanism to try and cope with a story that is essentially just wrong. It's not accurate, right? It's a real experience for you, like feeling not worthy or feeling inadequate. That's a very real experience that your body literally goes into fight or flight and has these visceral reactions. However, when we question those beliefs, we arrive at the fact that they're not truth. They're not based in capital T truth. They're not something you were born with, like a manufacturing label. It's a story, it's a program, it's made of words, and therefore we get to dissolve it and break the reality of it so that your truth can actually shine through again. And again, your truth is your superpower. Your authenticity is your gift. It's the magic that will create everything you desire in this world. It will breed the most beautiful connections and healthy relationships. It'll allow you to go after your dreams. It's the magic ingredient that we're all looking for in order to live the dream life, right? So anyway, going back to perfectionism and why I feel this is such an important topic to talk about is because a lot of us, especially women, like I said, have adopted this identity of perfectionism. And we almost wear it as like this like badge of honor, like, yeah, I'm a perfectionist because I care a lot, and I really want to make sure everyone's taken care of and I don't want to miss anything and I want to just give 110% to everything I do. And it's reminding me of that quote of like, the road to hell is paved by good intentions. And that's the thing. It's like all of our coping strategies are there with good intention because at some point in your life, you needed that in order to quote unquote survive. Right. And that's the thing is like, don't shame yourself for the coping strategies that you've adopted, even if they're not serving you anymore or they're unhealthy in some way, because A, that's not going to change it. You can't heal what you hate. Right. And B, they're there to they're there with good intention. Even if they're not serving you anymore, at some point they did. And there's a part of you that adopted that strategy in order to try and help you get by in this world, right? But again, this is all based on the perception that gets to be dismantled so that that coping strategy no longer needs to be there. It doesn't have a purpose anymore, right? It has served its purpose, and therefore we can let it go with love. That is the intention. And when it comes to perfectionism, the reason that, it sounds really nice and it comes with good intention, but really, if we look closely, what perfectionism really is a behavioral adaptation to insecurity. It's a behavioral adaptation to a deeper insecurity. And that's where we can start to really be honest with ourselves, because it's one thing to care a lot. We all do as humans, that's a natural tendency. But when we are abandoning our needs to try and, be perfect, quote unquote, that is coming from a deeper place of fear, of insecurity, of inadequacy to some degree. And that is not sustainable, nor is it going to ever produce the results that you really desire. So, when we start to question, like, where does this insecurity come from? And where did it originate for you? Those are questions that you can start to ask yourself, because once you understand it better and you understand these parts of you better, it is a lot easier to work with yourself. It is like there's a quote that says to forgive is to understand, or to understand is to forgive. It goes both ways, I guess, but it's really hard to forgive ourselves when we don't understand why, right? And so the digging of the psyche to get to the deeper root cause of what are you insecure about? What is the story that you keep repeating in your mind or that you associated to yourself back in the day, right? And usually this leads back to a hurtful experience from childhood, such as, for me, there, and I'm sure there's plenty for you as well. I have many that I could refer to, but there was a lot of times when I got picked on at school or made fun of for asking a dumb question in class or wearing something. And so it led me to try and be perfect, to overanalyze myself, and to just be hyper aware of everything that I was doing, wearing, saying, how I was moving through the world, how I was acting. I became hyper vigilant and adopted perfectionism as a coping strategy to try and protect myself from not feeling the insecurity and the shame and just the pain that came along with being made fun of, being casted out, being, criticized and judged in many ways. And I'm sure you have your own experiences of this, right? And so it's no coincidence that we then unconsciously adopted a strategy to try and protect us from feeling that pain. Because in those moments of shame, of hurtful experiences, when we're younger and we don't understand better, we don't have a greater perspective and awareness of these things, all we know is, okay, if I got hurt for saying this or being this way, that was authentic to me in the moment, right? Like I asked a question, someone labeled it as stupid and made fun of me. In that moment, I couldn't recognize, oh, it was just their judgment and it's probably coming from their own insecurity, because that's how humans operate, especially at that age. I couldn't make sense of that. So in that moment, I made it mean something about me. And that is key. We make our hurtful experiences mean something about us is wrong or bad or unlovable. And that is the piece that we as adults, when we're doing this inner work, this healing work, get to go back to and revisit with the consciousness that we have now, or the perspective and awareness that we have now, in order to shift the meaning that we associated with those hurtful experiences so they don't continue to run our lives as adults. And we also get to go back to that version of us. Again, it's these younger parts of us, usually from the ages of 0 to 14ish, that that got like that got really hurt. And in the moment, they didn't have the support, the advice, the validation, the love that they needed in order to not create that association that there's something wrong with them. But this is the beauty of the healing work as adults. We actually get to go back in our psyche, in through visualizations and meditations, to those younger versions of ourselves, to these core memories that are imprinted in our minds. And as our adult selves, we get to give ourselves exactly that which that inner child and that child didn't get in that moment. And we get to reframe the experience and make it mean something else other than there's something wrong with you, or you're not lovable, or you're imperfect and therefore you need to try harder. That is the opportunity that we have. So rather than seeing all of our hurtful experiences in our programming as just like unfortunate events that we have to live with, and we're just unlucky and it just sucks, that is the victim mentality, which I understand. I was there for a long time. However, that doesn't serve us, because then we're stuck with it. If we identify with it, or if we judge our stories, then we are stuck with them. Our opportunity is to look at them and say, you know what? I have so much compassion for that little girl who made that mean that there was something wrong about her and that she needed to be someone she's not, or try to be more than she is in order to be loved in this world. And I'm going to choose to shift that narrative, because that is a story. I am still that baby that is perfect just the way she is, with her imperfections and all, because we all have them. That is part of being human. And I get to shift the story that I have been living within. It's like a filter, like on Instagram or TikTok, when you put a filter on and suddenly that is everything you see through the picture. It's the same with these stories that we adopted at a young age. It becomes the lens through which we see ourselves in reality, and then we walk through life as if it were true and create more lived proof that it really is that way. So that is where we get to really catch ourselves and be very, very conscious of the thoughts that we think and the stories that we tell ourselves, and start to question them and start to go back in time to really heal from these experiences that created these core subconscious beliefs and identities. So, coming back to perfectionism, I want you to ask yourself, if you also have struggled with perfectionism in your life, what this coping mechanism is costing you now, right? We understand where it came from. We recognize that it was a part of us that adopted it to try to keep us safe before it knew better, and we're grateful and thankful for that. However, in order to now change that and have the motivation to really practice showing up as the worthy, complete, whole human being that we are, it's going to take really committing to that. Half of the battle is recognizing where it comes from and dismantling the lie and the story we've been living within. And the other half is really truly practicing showing up as who we know ourselves to be now. Not showing up and continuing to act from that insecure place, but truly showing up as a person who is complete, even with her fears and even with her insecurities. And we'll get to that in a moment, of how this process is one of acceptance, of really accepting all parts of you, your insecurities included. And when you don't make them mean something about you, it's a lot easier to walk through the world and just own it. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, I want you to get clear, and maybe you'll take some time to pause this video or this podcast to really journal about it. or you can do it later, but just ask yourself, like, what are these coping strategies costing me now as an adult? And I'll tell you, for me, it was, and at times still is, costing me, you know, going further in my career as a coach or as a mentor, because at times I hold myself back, or I don't take the risk that I need to take in order to get further along. And the reason is because I don't feel fully ready, or whatever the story is. But underneath that is, again, the little girl who is scared to be judged and who is scared that she's not enough somehow. And so it's like trying to feel fully ready is yet another coping mechanism to try and prevent that shame from coming up again, that those feelings of hurt and pain coming up again. It's also, at times, it costs me to overwork myself. This was especially true in the past, right? When I wasn't aware of this behavior and I just thought it was who I was, I would work 110%, especially through college and high school. Like, I just gave it my all because I was so attached to, the achievements and the validation and whatnot. And as a way to protect myself from the parts of myself that I thought weren't lovable or weren't enough. And it was also affecting my relationships. And this is probably one of the biggest ones. I know there are so many people out there who desire like true, loving, intimate, deep relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship or community. That is a basic human need, is the sense of belonging, right? We want to be seen, loved, heard, and understood for exactly who we are. And I can tell you right now that the perfectionist tendencies, though they seem like they'll help you attract the perfect partner, that's not actually what's going on. Because if you think about it, showing up or trying to be trying to be perfect is a performance, right? There's the trying piece, because you'll never actually be perfect. That is a complete illusion. No one is. That's part of the human game. It's like we're all here with our imperfections and our insecurities, or else we'd have nothing to strive for. And so not only is it an illusion, but it's a trying. You're playing a role. Whenever you're not being fully authentic, which includes your imperfections, includes your insecurities, but you're actually trying to be more than you are, you're trying to come off in a certain way in order to be liked, that is felt. That is a dissonance that is felt by others, right? And life is picking up on that too. There's an ickiness to that. And the more you do this work to really let go of your own masks, the more that you can feel it in others. And there's no judgment, there's no shame. We're all doing this to a degree because it's so subtle. However, the more that we can accept all parts of ourselves and let these masks down, then we stop trying. Then we stop acting, essentially, right? If you even think of the word personality, it comes from the word persona, which essentially is like this persona, this role that you play. It's like in theater when you act as if you were someone else. That's what's happening, just at a subtler degree. And so it costs us true intimacy and true, strong, healthy, vulnerable, beautiful relationships. Because intimacy, if you break up that word, into me I see, right? Or into you I see, it's being able to fully let yourself be seen exactly as you are. And the other person then is given basically a permission slip just through your acceptance of self to more fully be themselves. And when two people have dropped their masks to the best of their ability and are being radically authentic in the way that they express themselves, that is true authenticity. That is true intimacy. And intimacy is not just sexual. It can be totally platonic. It's just a sense of, I really see you and you're really seeing me. And that is like a whole new level of relating that adds so much depth and so much meaning to our relationships, right? And so that is a huge cost of continuing to hold on to the perfectionist tendencies. And so now let's move on to, how do we let go of it, right? How do we move past the perfectionism? The first thing to really, really note, and something that you can apply right now in this moment, moving forward in your life, is stop identifying as a perfectionist. Stop identifying as a perfectionist. Stop telling people I'm a perfectionist or using that as, an excuse to not start or whatever it is. Catch yourself, even when you say it to yourself. Catch yourself, not with shame, not with blame. That doesn't help. You're only human, it might happen. But when you catch yourself and say, hold on, actually, I'm not going to choose to identify with that anymore because I know my words are powerful and I know it's not accurate. It's just not. Again, you weren't physically born with a manufacturing label that says, Lilly, born in this place, she's a perfectionist or she isn't perfect. No, that's a story. It's a mental creation which feels real, but it's not true, right? And therefore, you can lovingly let it go by choosing not to continually repeat that same story and trapping yourself in words. Peter Crone has this quote that says, "We are all just walking conversations, right? We live in these worlds of words, and perfectionism is a box that we place ourselves in unknowingly that then we have to reenact everywhere we go. And it's exhausting. Like trying 110% all the time is exhausting, especially when it comes with this sense of like anxiety and fear of like, well, if I don't operate, at my best performance at everything I do, then the consequences are big. Like I might be shamed or abandoned or rejected or judged or whatever it is. And so it feels really intense. And that pressure creates so much stress, which messes with your health and your mental capacity and your creativity and your relationships. I mean, it's all connected. It's all connected. So I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. Okay. Moving on. First thing you can do, like I said, is let go of the story, right? Let go of the identity because it's not who you are. It's just a story. And what you can say instead when the tendency comes up, which it probably will, because, the way I think about it is, let's say you're in your 30s. I'm 30 years old. So I have lived with the story of perfectionism, I don't know, for at least 20 years. And that's a long time to repeat something to yourself and make it feel really real. The way that our neurocircuitry works in our brain and the way that, the reason why beliefs become ingrained, beliefs are just repeated thoughts. The way you can think of it is if you are skiing down a trail that is very, well paved and just has been ridden down hundreds and thousands of times, it's very marked, and easy to see. That is like the story of perfectionism. If that's something you've told yourself for decades, like it's a very clear path, and those neurons that fire together wire together, right? And so it is a very clear path and it's very entrenched in your mind. And so it's automatic. It has become part of your personality. And so it takes repetition and consistency to create new neural pathways or a new trail in fresh powder, let's say. So it just takes time and repetition and compassion to create new belief systems. But it's totally possible. And so instead of identifying and using the I am statement, saying I am a perfectionist, which again isn't true, it's not who you are, it's just a coping mechanism. You can instead say something like, a part of me is feeling insecure. Notice the difference there. It's subtle, but it's really profound. First of all, you're saying a part of me, which is way more accurate because you as a whole are not insecurity, right? You're not just a big old walking insecure human being. There's parts of you and there's moments in time when you feel super confident. You know exactly what you're doing. You're feeling great. There's no insecurity present. All right, you guys, I apologize. There was a brief interruption. If you're listening to this on the podcast, it won't feel like much, but on YouTube, you will see that now I have a different camera set up here. Tech problems that I'm figuring out, but my camera essentially ran out of space. And so I'm just going to continue with the recording that I have here on my computer. Anyway, I was talking about shifting into the language, right? From saying I am a perfectionist to shifting into a part of me is feeling insecure. And what I was saying is that it's a part of you because you're not always insecure. It's not who you are. And so it makes sense to say that there's a part of me in this moment, knowing that there's a lot of parts that make up who I am, right? There's a part that's insecure, there's a part that's secure, there's a part that's, confident, and there's a part that's not so confident. Whatever it is, there's a lot of different pieces that make up each of us. And so in a moment of perfectionist tendencies coming up or of insecurity coming up, what you can say rather than identifying with that feeling or that story is saying that you are feeling this way instead, right? And even more so, a part of you is feeling this way. It's way more accurate, and it creates a little bit of space between you and the feeling. Because again, the feeling is not who you are. And when we identify so closely with these icky feelings, with these uncomfortable feelings, it's a lot harder to own them, to accept them, right? And it feels a lot easier to try and protect ourselves from showing that to the world and from feeling them. Because if that's who we are, like as an identity, as an I am statement, that's really heavy, that's really intense. And it's not true. It's not accurate. So again, saying a part of me is feeling insecure is a huge way to start to use your words to help you dissolve the perfectionism, right? And the story that you're somehow not enough, even though you are insecure at times or you have insecurity within you. Words, if you can't already take from even just my emphasis on using your words intentionally, words are super, super powerful. A lot of people think that words are just descriptive in the sense that you are describing your reality when you use words or think thoughts that use words. But what you're actually doing is creating your reality. The term, fun fact here, but the term abracadabra that magicians use, the actual Hebrew translation of that word means as I speak, so I create. So we are literally magicians. By using words, we start to create and paint the picture of the life that we are living. It's very powerful. And so choosing our words intentionally starts to make such a difference in the experience that we experience, in the reality that we live. On top of starting to shift out of the illusion of perfectionism, really what it comes down to is learning and practicing the art of accepting all parts of you and all feelings that come with being human. There's a really beautiful quote that's also by Peter Crone that says, "Please don't ever become perfect. You'll have no one to relate to." And I just love that because part of the perfectionist thought process is thinking that you are imperfect and therefore everyone else, has their shit together or is somehow more put together and more perfect than you, right? And that is such an illusion. And again, it creates separation, it creates distance, which is the opposite of what we actually desire by even having that coping strategy to begin with. Right? We want the perfectionism because we think it's going to give us more love, more connection, more intimacy, more acceptance. And yet it does the opposite because everyone has their flaws. We are all human. We all have our imperfections. We all have our insecurities. And so when we can actually accept them and own them and love them even, it gives other people permission to also let down their walls, to also own their imperfections. And that is where humans relate. Like, yes, we relate over the good things, but how deeply do you relate to someone and connect to someone when they show their vulnerability, when they share their imperfections, and when they just share with you the parts of them that they don't, show on display as often? It gives us such a feeling of relatability when we hear another person talk about these things or when a friend shares something vulnerable with us, because we're like, oh my gosh, me too. I have felt that way too. And when we don't talk about these things or we just pretend they're not there and we put on the mask of perfectionism to hide it all, it actually makes people feel like, oh wow, they don't actually understand me. Like they don't feel this way because they never show it. Right? And so you let that be another motivator to start to help you practice letting down the perfectionist tendencies and owning who you truly are. And like I said, what this really comes down to is a true, deep, radical self acceptance of all parts of you. Because what is the hard part is not even just the feelings of shame and insecurity and imperfection. The hard part is the judgment we feel towards that. It's the shame we feel for thinking that those parts and those feelings and having them are somehow wrong or are unlovable or not okay, right? And that they mean that something's wrong with us. That's the part that's hard. And that part we can actually work through and dissolve. Our insecurities and our imperfections, like that's part of being human. It's like we signed this metaphorical contract when we came into this body, and just, yeah, it's part of every single human on this earth. We all have our imperfections. And so that's not something we can just get rid of. And I think so many people have this illusion and this unachievable goal in mind that they want to become this perfect version of themselves, or this super confident, always confident version of themselves. And the reality is that that's just not true. That's not how it works. Healing is actually an act of embracing all parts of you. It is becoming okay with your insecurities, with your hurt, with the small parts of you, right? That will always be there. Because the moment that you don't label them as bad or unlovable, or like they mean that something's wrong with you, suddenly it's like, okay, yeah, it's a part of me. It's not exactly who I am. It's a feeling that'll pass, and it's human. We all have our versions of this. And suddenly it's like, I actually don't feel bad about having insecurities. And so I'll share an example with you that will, make this more practical and more relatable. But even in partnership, in like romantic relationships, so many times, so many of the conflicts that arise are because of jealousy, right? Again, a feeling that we're all very used to. We all experience it as humans. No matter who you are, we've all experienced jealousy to some degree, right? Because there's always going to be someone who's in your eyes better than you, or prettier than you, or more successful than you. And there's always going to be people who you feel are, superior or inferior, both, right? It's all perspective at the end of the day. However, these conflicts usually arise and they get worse because we are so afraid to own the fact that we are jealous, or that we are feeling jealous, I should say, right? Because it feels so wrong to say that like we are feeling jealous, or that there's a part of us that is jealous, because we're either so identified with that and it seems so cringy or unlovable, right, to be dating someone who labels themselves as jealous. And so we hide it and we dance around it and we project and we try to like say that we're mad about other things, or we just don't get to the point. And so then it becomes this fight because they can feel that there's something wrong and that there's a jealous part, and it's not being honest. You're not being honest and authentic. And so the opportunity there is to let the masks down. If you're in a safe container, if you're in a safe relationship, right, where you feel safe enough to be honest, and put your ego aside and just say, hey, you know what? There's a part of me. Again, we're starting with a part because it's not all of who you are. There's a part of me who's feeling really jealous right now. I promise you that the moment that you let that mask down and just express vulnerably what you're really feeling in the moment, it will be received with so much more compassion. Because you're taking responsibility over your experience. You're not saying it's your fault that I feel the way that I do. You're just saying, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And any loving partner would be like, oh, I hear you. Like, I have felt jealous too, And suddenly it's not an attack, or like you did, you're saying your partner did something wrong or whatnot, but it's showing your truth, your humanity, which again, we've all been there. And it's beautiful. The rawness, the realness is really beautiful. So accepting all parts of us, knowing that there's nothing wrong with us, knowing that now we are no longer in an environment like we were in, I don't know, middle school, if that's where your core memory stems from, where we're going to get bullied and shamed for who we are or for saying something silly or whatnot, right? And ironically, when you accept yourself, you don't encounter people who judge you as much. We're constantly teaching people how to treat us. And when we accept ourselves, most people accept us too. And they find it really inspiring and just honorable when we accept ourselves exactly as we are, all parts included. The last piece of healing the perfectionist tendency, and really any coping mechanism that you have that you want to shift, is starting to nurture the little child within you, the version of you who got hurt, who associated a hurtful experience with the story of inadequacy, insecurity, or scarcity, and going back to reparent all of those younger versions of yourself that are still living within you. And this can happen through visualization and meditation or any other practice where you just go back into your own psyche, back into your own memories, and emotionally connect to the part of you, maybe in that experience, that got hurt and that made it mean that there was something wrong with her and that she needed to be someone she's not. And as your adult self, with the perspective that you now have, the awareness that you now have, you get to go back and hold that little you. You get to give her or him the love, the validation, the reassurance that they needed in that moment that they may have not gotten. And that is so healing. And this is how we regulate our nervous system again in the moment, right? It's how we nurture the emotional parts of us that are coming up when we get triggered as adults. We think it's just about the surface level stuff, but most often it goes way back to these younger parts. And we have the opportunity every single day to really honor and love on that inner child. I'm happy to share more about this if you guys are interested in talking deeper about the inner child and healing the inner child. Comment below or just send me a DM on Instagram. I'll link it below in the show notes, and I'm happy to talk more about that. But for now, just know that inner child healing is really powerful, and it's an opportunity that we have to really shift in the present moment. All right, y'all. So this is where I'm going to end the conversation today. I hope that you really took something from this beautiful conversation, recognizing that there is nothing wrong with you. And also that these coping mechanisms that you may have adopted as a way to protect yourself at a younger age may not be serving you anymore. And this is where you get to really take ownership over your experience and choose to heal. Choose to shift the stories and the identities that you've been living within that are no longer serving the person that you are here to be and the life that you're here to create. Because everything stems from you, everything stems from your relationship to yourself. And it's such a beautiful opportunity that we have in these bodies to really heal, to transform, to evolve. That's what we're really here on planet Earth to do, if you ask me. We're not here to just acquire more things and, buy the nice car and the home and start the family and travel. Like, those are all beautiful parts, and like that's what makes life fun. But the real meaning behind it all is doing this work. It's continuously shedding layers of you, that aren't really you, and truly embracing all of the authentic and quirky and weird and beautiful, raw versions and parts of you and qualities of you. That's what makes you so magnetic and so aligned to attract the life that you most desire. I've seen it time and time again, not only in my own life, but also in the life of my clients and friends. It's a really beautiful process and journey we get to go on. So don't view this as like a really, grueling and hard and uncomfortable healing process. Like, yes, there's discomfort. Every time you grow, there's got to be a little bit of willingness to step out of your comfort zone and feel some feelings that are not so fun to feel. But on the other side of that is always expansion and more beauty and more success and more health in your relationships. It's endless. and there's no limit to your potential and to your amount of joy that you can experience and abundance and everything you desire. So keep going. Catch yourself when you're in an inaccurate, inefficient story and choose differently and take care of the little you within. Always, always, always. I love you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bearing with me as I move through these technical learning curves. And I'm excited to keep creating for you. If there's anything else you would like to see from me, I would love your input. Leave a comment, message me. And yeah, I can't wait to talk to you next time.